And at CCO, we have a formula for success that the help desk staff shares daily, probably at least a dozen times, and it's a pretty simple formula, but it works. And if you follow it, we really feel that you will pass the next time you sit for the exam. What ends up happening when people come to us and say, I didn't pass, and they need to take a what we call a retake strategy call, and Alicia and I both do those, we'll go over these steps to find out what they didn't do. And I think I've had one person since I've been doing this since 1999 that said, I did all the steps and I still didn't pass. And I find that a little suspect, but everyone that follows these steps, they pass. And one of the ones is this last one, the time practice exams, that a lot of people tend to skimp on. Would you agree, Alicia?
Oh, absolutely. That is, you ask them and they say, well, did you, how many practice exams did you take? Oh.
Yeah. So we're gonna spend some time talking about this formula. We haven't done it on a live with Laureen, so we thought this would be a good one. And since a lot of people were asking about it, we noticed a lot of people taking exams this past Saturday and the Saturday before. A lot of those last, minute 2016 exam takers. I think things will settle down a little bit and even out as we go into the new year. But this is the formula. These are the 4 pieces that we recommend, that you take a solid course somewhere, like what they call an 80-hour equivalent course, like a semester-long course. We hope you take ours, but if you haven't and you've taken a course somewhere else, if you had homework where you did textbook reading and you did textbook exercises and workbook exercises and you spent time with the manual and you used the index and you turned to the tabular, you turned to the main section of CPT, that's what we're talking about, that homework kind of stuff. And then obviously lectures from your instructor, maybe some other ancillary activities, and an end of module or end of chapter exam to make sure that you've mastered at least 80%. In our particular program, we require that you get a 70% before moving on. I normally advise people to aim for an 80, and that's what I do with my kids in homeschool too. I just think that's a better number. But don't say I'm going to keep doing it over and over until I get a 90. You want to go for that 80-20 rule. Just keep moving along, get through the course, because the goal is to sit for the exam and move on and get a job. It's not about perfection. And if you are a perfectionist, then you really need to work on getting that out of your system. So that's what we mean by a solid course. Anything you wanted to share about that particular step, Alicia?
No, I think it is real important, like you said, about the score. We have people that take the course and they'll test 4 times in one chapter, and and their grade keeps going up because they want 100% or a 90%. And I always tell them it's not about what your score is. It's about what you retain and how you research. So I would rather you get a 70 and understand the things that you missed than get a 100 and just have skimped by through there. Sometimes missing something is also the best way to retain it.
Yeah, definitely. So that's step 1, a good solid course. Step 2 is the review blitz. That's really how CCO got its start, was our CPC review blitz product. It was our only blitz, so it was called the blitz. But now we've got a COC blitz, a CIC blitz. A new CPMA was just released today, and let me tell you, it's flying off the shelves here. But it's basically a review. It's a concise review. There's no homework per se. It's about you reviewing the key concepts that you're going to be tested on. We call them competencies. I think we borrowed that from AHEMA. They call them, what are the core competencies you're going to be tested on. So we go over everything that you're going to be tested on the exam and make sure we cover it in their review. There's no fluff with this. There's no, okay, let's go do a few exercises. It's just right down to the nitty-gritty of what you're going to be tested on. And of course, a good review blitz goes over exam strategies, how to take the exam. That's half the battle. Recently in our CPC blitz, we released a video called The Art of Skipping. And it's something I've taught over the years, but I finally just kind of refined it and made it like just gave it its own floor space, if you will. And students right that day that learned it, the next day they didn't do any additional studying. They took a new practice exam and they used that technique of the art of skipping. They improved their points by 10. So, and I've had students say, yeah, no, I did my practice exams. I said, did you work on skipping the hard ones and coming back to them later? No, I really took my time and did each one. I'm going to do the skipping thing later. I'm like, no, 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 no. That's not how you do it. So, so how you practice taking the exams is very key. I jumped ahead a little bit to the time practice exams, but that is part of the exam strategy. So they're very tightly related. Anything
want
you want to share about that?
Yeah, because I get a lot of questions when people call in and they want to know, what product it will meet my needs. And then once I know their background and what their goals are, then I can kind of, maybe what they thought they were going to do isn't necessarily, the best path for them as far as, do they need a full course, or maybe they just need the blitz because they've already taken a course, et cetera, et cetera. And one thing that we like to make sure that you understand, you cannot decide to take the exam and get by with just the blitz. The
Right.
blitz is designed for somebody that has already had a course. Now, you say, well, I've been a coder, and I just talked to somebody already yesterday. They said, I've been coding inpatient for a long time, and she wanted to get her CPC. And the more I talked about it and asked her some key questions, I said, I could advise you that you could get the blitz. However, you really need that full course. You don't have any CPT background, and that's what most of the course, the exam is. The blitz is going to come with the full course. So, don't go in thinking I can just do it with the blitz. Yeah, the blitz is for somebody that's already had a course, and again, we'd like for you to take our course, but you need a course before you can go in and think that the blitz is going to do it. The blitz is the step with the practice exams before you take your exam.
And then step 3 is, marking up your manuals. This has become huge in how we teach, and we actually gave it a new name. It got its new name in 2016, BAT, and that stands for Bubble, Highlight, Annotate Technique. We also refer to it as bubbling and highlighting. That's kind of what I called it since 1999 is where this method was born, and we have a whole page on our website that talks about this method and how it came about. We did trademark bubble and highlighting. You can put TM on any phrase that you use all the time on your website. We tried to register it, but apparently you can't register adjectives like bubbling and highlighting. So BAT is on its way to becoming a registered trademark. Right now it's just a TM, but it stands for bubbling, highlighting, annotate technique, bubble, highlight, annotate technique. And so we use a cute thing, you go to the Bat Cave to, see the videos on how to do it, but it's really a simple technique. It's basically where in CPT, this is where it got its start. When I was preparing myself, I looked at the study guide from the AAPC, and I started to read it. I had 2 weeks prior to my exam. Okay, I was definitely a procrastinator, and I realized that, okay, they're basically taking the guidelines that are in the manual, and they're basically rephrasing it and saying it back to me. So I said, I can't bring the study guide in on the exam, but I can bring the CPT manual and the ICD manual and the HCPCS manual. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my notes or things stand out to me in the manual because it's an open book exam. And that's pretty much how this method was born. And when I started reading the blurbs in the study guide, I realized, oh, they're talking about this group of codes and then that group of codes. And I realized that basically the indented codes was what, it was being grouped in with that parent code. So I just started drawing a circle around it. And then I started to make comparisons between the neighboring groups now, or neighboring bubbles, and would see the key word normally in the parent code, so I would underline it in a different, or highlight it in a different color, or rewrite it so it jumped out at me. That was the goal. I wanted, when I was taking the exam, for it to jump out at me so I could see the differences really quickly. And it worked. And, you know, it helped a lot of people. So you're bubbling that group of codes together. And for CPT, you're highlighting everything after the semicolon. I normally tell you to use a pale color yellow and make that your color throughout the whole book. Yellow is reserved for highlighting everything after the semicolon. Then you could use a different color to highlight, you know, other key phrases. For ICD, it's a little different. We don't really do bubbling per se in ICD, but we do use the highlighting to bring out key phrases. And then the annotate part are just those key words. What's the difference between the groupings, between the bubbles, or key notes to put in the margin to remind you of things. Maybe in ICD it's to remind you of those guidelines way back in the front of the book that we forget are even there. It's like, okay, remember that guideline in, you know, section 2.C point whatever, and you might even write a page number for you to flip back to in the front of your book, or cross-reference you to somewhere else in the manual. So I always say bubbling and highlighting, or the BAT technique, BAT system, is your current self being kind to your future self when you're taking the exam. And it helps people in the real world. And I don't, maybe Alicia, you can share some examples from students that you've coached on how the methods help them with their coursework and their exam experience.
We usually tell people to, with our PBC course, I tell them to start this with Chapter 6 because this is the start of CPT with our PBC course. And I can tell you that once they start doing this, the CPT manual is divided up into body systems, you know, and so that's exactly how the course is laid out. And they find that once they start this, that they can answer more quickly. You know, their eye is drawn to just the pertinent information. That's what I keep hearing over and over again. And, you know, we know this works because Laureen's been doing this since the 90s. I know the video that she did, Boyd and her friend did, Barbara, yeah, from way back when, you know, and I was looking at that and said, you know, this is such a solid technique to use that, you know, that's been around since, you know, Laureen originated it, and what it was there was a need, and she found a way to fulfill the need, and it's not that it really changes, it's just that it makes things leap off the page for you. You know, I've gone through times when I didn't have mine done, and we went to one of the conferences together, and I didn't take my manuals on the plane, but Laureen handed me hers, and I was thinking, oh, how this is just so, makes everything so easy. So
make it manual. You got to mark it up.
I know. You know, and so don't leave your CPT manual naked. You need to have the BAT technique in there, and you will find that you don't have to think as hard. You will be able to answer more quickly, and you will get the right answer more often because of the BAT technique.
Yeah, and we had a situation where, you know, we were trying for years, you know, when I would do my blitz review and I'd flip through my pages of CPT, and some student would see a note flash by in the upper left corner. Wait, what was that note? I'm like, you don't need it. But I want it. I'm like, you don't need it for the exam. Focus on the core principles that you're going to be tested on. And those are just notes that I have accumulated over the years, but they wanted them. They wanted all my notes. So we were trying to provide all of the notes, and the AMA is not too keen on us showing every single page of CPT on video, so we had to take those videos down. But we do have an alternative now where we've used like an artist rendition of where the notes are and things like that. So we're slowly releasing that for 2017, and the feedback we've gotten so far from people that have access to the Bat Cave really appreciate the extra effort. So it's become very popular. It's become mainstream. We have competitors copying it, claiming that they've created it. So it's, you know, we're the ones that started it. We've I think perfected it, and we're going to continue to add to it over the years. So if you want to read more about the history of it and see all of the wonderful, I'm sorry, I'm trying to hold my earpiece, and I know I look kind of silly like a news broadcaster here, but it keeps falling out. I told Boyd, I said, I must have like deformed ears that these pieces don't stay on my ear. But let me take you to the site, cco.us. And up on the top, you'll see where it says BAT. If you click on that, that's our whole story. This is our BAT story. And you can see this video interview of Barbara Chiappini. She was
Definitely want to watch that. That's great.
Yeah,
That was fun to see.
in one of our interviews here, and she happens to live locally. She was one of my first students, and she became one of my instructors when I had a local school. And she brought this book in the background, and you'll notice it looks a little different because it's a 3-ring binder. And that was the last year, the year 2000, that they actually had the CPT in 3-ring binder. I still wish they had that format. But and she still bubbles and highlights my book every year for me. She's a sweetheart. So, so check that out. Look at the timeline. Look at all the stories. These are all people that have, you know, been using this method for many years. And I want you to read it because bubbling and highlighting is a pain in the butt to do, to be quite honest. It's very tedious. It's simple, but it's tedious. And it's worth doing. And so my advice today is don't get hung up on needing every single note. Just if you do the bubbling and the highlighting prior to listening to the review of that section, so say it's integumentary, go in and do the bubbling and highlighting for integumentary. Then listen to the review lecture. Now your books are marked up as far as the bubbles and highlights, and when you listen to the lecture, that's where you're going to write the notes down. Because I'm going to say, okay, look at bubble, you know, A and bubble B. What's the difference? And it makes you think, and that's the better way to learn. Look at the two bubbles. What's the difference? Ah, okay, location, location, location. This one is of the trunk. This one is of the arms. And, you know, whatever the difference is, then that's what you make a note of. You don't need to copy, right? If you think it through, you'll learn more. And that's really how I originally taught it. So, you know, yes, we've spoiled you, and now we give you all the notes, but don't lose the point of what it's for. It's to help with the process of elimination.
You'll be able to see codes you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
Because you're going through the process. You know, it's like, oh, I didn't even know there was a code for that. You know.
And we have a little form here. If you have done the BAT system to your book, fill out this form, and we are giving away CCO items, mugs, tote bags, and things like that. If you have a really good, compelling BAT story to share, let us know how it's helped you on the job. Because you know, people are like, do I have to bubble and highlight every year? No. If you work for a cardiologist, then obviously take the time to do that section because you'll be looking at it the most. And you know, if you never do anesthesiology, then no, I wouldn't bother doing that. But you know, if you become a CPC Blitz customer, you will have access to that for a year. And if you become a CCO club member, you could have access to it indefinitely, year after year after year. New CEU opportunities. It's a great way to stay current and keep your manual up to date. So that is that's the third step, bubble, highlight, annotate technique. Do that to your manuals. And then last is timed practice exams. Maybe you want to talk about that for a minute, Alicia. I feel like I've been blathering.
Absolutely. You know, the time practice exams are really, really important. And you know, you can get, we have a free CPC practice exam. We have a free ICD-10 practice exam. Some people think about it and they say, well, I just need the CPT, the CPC. But, you know, a big chunk of the core, the CPC exam is ICD-10. You want to be really, really savvy with both areas. Not only does this help you with your timing, you know, you got your timing down, it's going to help you rule out questions right away, and it's third, it's going to give you an idea of what it feels like to sit for the exam. We've been told multiple times that our practice exams are harder than the real exam, and we'll have people come back and say, okay, I took the CPC exam on Saturday, and let me tell you, your practice exams were much harder. And we're proud of that because the practice exams, we give you the rationale. Again, it's okay to miss a question because the rationale is going to help you figure out what the right answer was. But you need to be getting an 80 to 85%, really an 85% on the practice exam.
Yeah.
The first time you take one, you're probably not going to do that. It's going to give you that exposure you need, what to expect. The shorter practice exams that we've done, they're like 50 or 60 questions. You can't sit there for 6 hours and take an exam while you're getting ready. These are 2.5-hour exams that have a portion of everything that you're going to be tested on. We're going to, in cardiology, the pathology, CPT, ICD, anatomy. It's going to give you a highlight of all of those to make sure that you're comfortable going in to the CPC exam. If you can get an 85% or better, you're golden. You're ready to go.
Yep.
And so that's what you're shooting for. We have the 3. You may want to do our gem ones, the ruby, the sapphire, and topaz. Don't worry about, you can buy them separately or you can buy them as a bundle. I advise that you get them as a bundle. Get all 3 because they have different questions in them, of course, but it is an overview of everything that you're going to be tested on, and it's going to give you the flavor of what to expect when you sit down. That's the biggest thing that people fear when they go and take the CPC is, what do I expect? And when you open up that test booklet and the very first thing on the first page is a case that's a page and a half, you won't freak out over that because you know what to expect. You've taken the practice exams and you've gotten that good 85% or better. Those are the people that come back and tell us that they got an 80 or a 90 on the CPC exam.
Yep, definitely. And another tip for those time practice exams, use the sample Scantron form. The AAPC has allowed us to have a copy and share it with our students. We've got it on our site. I believe it's if you can't find it, then you can request it from our help desk.
But the bottom link,
yeah, but that way when you have a printed exam, and we did go to extra effort to make our exams printable. We don't make our rationales printable because unfortunately we live in an age where people feel it's okay to share logins, to print tests, and hand out PDFs of a paid resource. So I won't go too much into that, but it's just something that drives me crazy. But use the Scantron form. Have the printed test, like the real exam is going to be in a proctored situation. Fill in the bubbles. Get used to doing that. And then when you're all done, and your 2 hours or 2 hours and 10 minutes that you've given yourself is up, then go online and pop your answers in, but make sure you have time to review. Unless you don't mind popping them back in the next day. If you just want to get your score and then go over it again the next day, that's fine. You can go in and do that. And give yourself enough time to really go over every rationale, even the ones you got right, because you learn so much from that, especially if they're rich rationales. And we have very good rationales. The AAPC has very good rationales. So just to let you know where to get practice exams that you can do in a timed fashion. On our website, this is, if you go to the main menu under practice exams, and then you go to CPC practice exam, this is going to take you to our Ruby, Sapphire, and Topaz. Those are the code names that we've given these exams. They're 60 questions each, not 50 like the AAPCs. And the reason we do that is the Scantron form is 5 columns of 30 questions each. That's how they get to 150 questions. So it's a lot easier to practice timing methods. We teach a 1 hour per column method, so that makes it nice and easy, 30 and 30. You can also get a free one on our site under freebies. If you go to the very middle menu, freebies, and you scroll down, and we've got several practice exams now. Here's our free CPC one. We have a free COC, and recently released a new billing one, the CPB, for the Certified Professional Biller practice exam. It's our goal to have a free one for every credential that we help train for, but these are the 4 we have right now. ICD-10 was more for when you had to do the proficiency, but we have people, like 10 people a day, taking this free one just to work on their skills. So take advantage of that. If you are a CPC Blitz customer, there's also an additional Blitz practice exam in there as well. So those are different places to get that.
And all of our students for the PBC course, they have a final, which is like a mock.
Right, a big one. So that's our formula for success. It works. If people come to me and they didn't pass, we start exploring all of those steps And come to find out, sometimes they had practice exams, but they did it more like homework. They didn't time themselves. I'm like, no, that's critical. Or they didn't practice the skipping, or they didn't do the 1 hour per column time management strategy. And so to me, that's wasting these precious gems. That's why we gave them gem names. These practice exams were so hard to create. They're so hard to maintain. It's a lot of work. And that's why, it upsets me when I hear about people paying for it $30 and giving it to 10 friends. It's like, come on. Let us keep supporting it and make sure it's a great product year after year. But they're very critical to the success. Popping in or watching videos, I was going to say popping in DVDs. We don't do DVDs anymore. But, watching videos is not going to make you pass the exam. That's just a tool to help get the knowledge into your head. But the actual making it work and stick is doing the practice exams. And I use the analogy all the time on my consultation calls that I do. Picture back when you learned how to drive. You first started by reading the paper manual, and you learned all that stuff, and you could do the written test. But you couldn't do the driving test unless you put hours behind the wheel and you practiced. So, and it's the same thing with the CPC exam. So many people say, oh, I'm just going to go take it and see how I do. Well, why would you want to do that? Because it's 5 hours and 40 minutes. That's a long practice exam. When you can, do a practice in 2 hours and save those for the real event, because you don't get the benefit of true rationales if you don't pass. So it's really kind of wasted in my opinion. So.